Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's very special guest is none other than Alexandra. She is a CME, CE writer, and also she teaches medical writers on how to specialize in this field. She also hosts the Right Medicine podcast. So welcome again, Alex. And can you tell us a little bit about what you
Hi,
do in
Jane.
CME and CE writing before we begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes, I am a medical writer who specializes in creating content for health education content for health professionals, and that's sometimes known as continuing medical education, which is something that in most parts of the world, health professionals have to do in one way or another to maintain licensure, to maintain certification, to be able to continue to practice. And, it's a very specific type of education that helps health professionals stay current in standards of care and new therapies and changes to indications in existing therapies. And as a writer, I am helping to create education content to support the learning that health professionals have to do in an ongoing basis. So in my previous professional life, I was an academic and a registered nurse. And so I bring those pieces of my past into my current work.
Awesome. So one of the things I was really impressed about is you really touch upon this topic of future quite a bit on your podcast or YouTube channel too. So what I really thought was neat is the slogan of your YouTube channel, which is the future of education is sound. So I'm
The
all
future
about
of learning is
future,
sound.
yes, future
Yeah.
learning, future education,
Mhm.
continuing education, adult education, all that good stuff,
Mm.
right? So right off the bat, because I'm all about, future and AI these days,
Yeah.
and I think many of us are curious to discover more and hear about more of it. And I thought it'll be very helpful and nice for us to hear from you some of your wisdoms regarding this topic, if that's okay with you. Why it's so important to, use AI with caution, integrity, and how is it influencing your field of medical writing?
Oh, that's such a great question. So, yeah, like a lot of people, I'm definitely exploring and experimenting with AI. I suppose in different ways. I mean, AI has been influencing a lot of the work we do for a few years. So, for instance, I think Otter AI has just entered our Zoom meeting, and Otter has been around for a while. It's a transcription, an automated transcription service that you can plug into meetings. And I've been using that for a couple of years. And so it automatically generates notes from meetings and summaries. So that's one form of AI that actually I find incredibly valuable, because I do a lot of interviews, not only for the podcast, but also in my work as a medical writer. And it means I can be present and have a conversation with somebody without having to worry about taking notes to capture, what we're saying. That's at one end of the AI spectrum. I suppose at the other end of the AI spectrum are things like ChatGPT and all the other tools that are coming out on the, based on the foundation of that technology. And so I've definitely been playing around with what ChatGPT can do. I have a paid subscription which allows you to do a little bit more and add some plugins to do some other things. But I have to say that I am mainly using ChatGPT as a research assistant and as an idea sparker. So I find it useful to create some prompts around ideas that I'm interested in exploring and asking for some help about what are some things that I need to think about if I want to write an article on X. And it's very useful when you're faced with a blank page, just to kind of get your creative juices flowing. So I do think there's a role there for that kind of technology. And I also use AI in the production and workflow process of producing my podcast. So, for instance, there is a platform that I use called swellai.com, which helps to generate transcripts and show notes and summaries and titles and different things from each podcast episode. Now, what happens with all of that is that you get very generic, I'm going to say flat text. It's not very interesting. There's certainly no color or energy or liveliness to the text that you get back from these types of technology. But it's kind of, I see it, okay, it's a foundation that helps to speed up the workflow a little bit, and then allows me and my podcast manager to work with that information and build that out with more energy and color and liveliness. It's not a substitute. I would say the other part of AI is, so I mentioned before, I do a lot of research in my work as a medical writer. I'm also a trained qualitative researcher, so I do a lot of interviews to get health professionals' perspectives on education that they've participated in, for instance. And that generates, those qualitative interviews generate a lot of data. Now, there are some people who argue that you can take all of that text-based data and get AI to analyze that data for you. I don't think that is the case for a few reasons. One is, again, as I said earlier, you get this kind of flat, raw, not very interesting text all kind of lumped together. The second thing is, when ChatGPT is doing its work, and I guess some of these other programs as well, the information that they pull back is often really homogeneous. So it's not really pulling from the very wide kind of cache of information that is out there in the world. And what I mean by that is, we know from some of the research that's been done already that it's already challenging for women of color and people in LGBTQ plus groups and some other groups to get access to some of the technology to create content that ChatGPT is pulling from. And so there's bias built in to the information that you get. And I think we need to be really cautious about that. For me, and I'll stop talking a minute, for me, that really has the potential to regress to a very homogenous world. And I don't think we want that. So in terms of AI and the kind of efficiencies that it affords us, I think the downside is that in the quality of the content itself, there's the potential to be really for it to be really narrow and homogenous and ultimately biased, and we don't want that.
Wow. It's such in-depth, a great topic to discuss upon. What you just mentioned is such a gem. I think we need more people to be included in terms of this kind of discussions. I'm really up for, further discussions down the road, but from what I hear is you're more of like using it as a productivity tool to help you, for example, for your researches and perhaps for other things, things like that. And also it can be good sometimes for your brainstorming and all that, but you have to be very cautious. For one, you want it to be more personalized. You want your content to be more personalized with more emotive messages, for example, and colorfulness and livelihood. And also, which is another like very, very important thing we need to not forget, is the bias you mentioned. Because AI is, in terms of all this, it's in the end the set of data, and data tells you one thing and another, but it's also interpretations and how you receive
Yeah.
it. Yes,
Yeah.
and how it's given to some people. And like the other day, I was talking about this, number of data sets and how it's influencing the quality of translation. For example, if you have,
Right.
lower number of data sets, good
Mhm.
quality data sets, then your results won't be as good as you would expect.
Yeah.
So, for example, there are more language groups to be included and well managed and well trained data sets,
Mhm.
so that people who are receiving this information from AI won't be as biased, and like,
Yeah.
because it can be very skewed sometimes. So there are all these things, very complex matters that require more discussions, I think. Would you have any thoughts on this too?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely correct. And I can't speak to translation, but one of the things that I do notice is, so a lot of the information I'm providing, let's just stick with ChatGPT at the moment, but also swellai.com, which is what I use for the podcast. It's my content in the sense that it's based on either writing that I've done or interviews that I've conducted. So there's some boundaries around that. But I notice, so I'm not really asking ChatGPT to kind of scrape the internet. I'm really asking it
Mm.
to work with what I provide it and give it a different structure, or make some suggestions for a different structures. But what I
Uh-huh.
notice is that it keeps churning. It's definitely got a tone, and it
Mhm.
keeps it's there's a few words I've noticed come up again and again and again, like for instance, delve. Let's delve into the world of, let's delve into the realm of. It's a particular phrase that keeps jumping out at me in lots of the different kind of projects that I've used AI for. So that to me is a kind of signal that
Mhm.
okay, this is pretty narrow. um
Mhm.
it's sometimes I'll push back and I'll say, provide provide an alternative phrase for this, and it'll come up with something different but also pretty similar and not very imaginative. So again, to me, that speaks to, there's a narrowness there, there's a
Mhm.
homogeneity in the language it is using. Now, I guess some people might argue that, okay, well, it's up to me to educate the technology to, broaden its horizons. But why don't I just do that for myself?
Mhm.
Yeah. So I agree. I think that there has to be a much wider conversation and a much
Mhm.
wider database for these kinds of technologies to draw upon, in order to have, utility and value in the
Sure, sure,
future.
definitely.
But I'm a little worried that that's not going to happen.
But I think this is invaluable, thought you're sharing over here. It's a great, great point in terms that, I realize that what you're trying to say and share, what you're sharing with us is that really let it work for you
Mhm.
instead of, you being dragged by, whatever information or advice it gives or it is to give to you. So let it work for you, let it
I like
make
that.
suggestion to you, but
Mhm.
you are actually the guider. You should be the
Yes.
leader of the technology.
Yeah, no, I agree
Yes.
with that 100%.
Thank you so much for sharing this. So, my next question is actually about your other contents. I
Mm.
subscribed to your newsletter recently, and I think there
Okay.
are so many valuable tips. Even if you're not from the medical writing field, there
Mhm.
are some wisdom that can be, delivered. So, for example,
Thank
and this
you.
is also from your YouTube or podcast
Mhm.
content, how in medical writing policies and regulations are so relevant and important. All of these things are new information for me and very interesting for me to
Mm.
to see and listen. So including, for example, needs assessments and some of your other wisdoms, well-being wisdoms and all that. Is there anything else you want to share before we go?
Oh gosh, that's such a wide question. I
Yes,
think
I'm
that,
sorry.
yeah, no,
Or
no, that's it.
probably like viewers and listeners, we can first subscribe to your newsletter and then revisit some of your contents in terms of
Yeah,
well-being.
absolutely. And I can share information about that. But just to kind of pick up on, you mentioned well-being wisdom, one of the things that is really important to me in the work that I do is that people learn to take care of themselves
Mm.
as they're working. So they, a lot of the people that I work with and for are attached to keyboards for very long periods of time, and that can really mess up your
Yeah.
body in lots of ways. It messes up your breathing because you're kind of hunched over the desk.
Oh.
Your muscles at the front of your body get really tight. Your forearms, your wrists, your fingers, these are all things that get really kind of stiff and uncomfortable over time. And when we're younger, we don't necessarily pay too much attention to that. So one of the things that I try to do in the work that I do is just little activities, movement or breath-based
Mm.
activities that people can sprinkle into their day to prevent some of the injuries that can occur over time from happening, and also, relieving discomfort, and also easing stress. Stress is such a large part of the day for many, many people. And we know that chronic stress has all sorts of impacts on our bodies. So, but there are some relatively simple things that we can do, every so often in our day, just to downregulate our nervous systems and give ourselves a break. So I try and emphasize that, particularly through the newsletter and a little bit in the podcast.
Thank you so much. Definitely something to keep in mind.
For
These
sure.
days, yes, so it's so easy to get, distracted, but also get too focused on work and forget about activities and all that. So I really liked your LinkedIn post the other week regarding the book, mentioning the importance of, what was the title of the book, may I ask?
I think it was I Didn't Do the Thing Today by
Oh,
Madeline
yes,
Dorr.
yes, I
Yeah,
recommend.
and it's
Yeah.
really a critique again around productivity and how that can kind of suck the soul out of you. And I think that this is one of the downsides of artificial intelligence potentially,
Mm.
because it's exciting for a lot of people, but it can lead you into it can lead you much more deeply, even more deeply into a technological world, and you're sort of even more chained to the keyboard, so not a good thing in the long run.
Yes, that's one side of it, definitely. Something to, be cautious about
Mhm.
also. So, okay, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for answering so wisely, like when
Well,
I was
thank you for
throwing all these
inviting me.
questions to you. So, would there be any closing comments, and where can we find you further after this?
Um, yeah, I don't have any closing comments. Thank you. I think you've given me opportunity to talk quite a lot. You can find me at alexhowson.com. That's ALEXHOWSON.com. My podcast is Right Medicine, WRITE Medicine. And I'm also linked in Alexandra Howson PhD, CHCP.
Thank you so much. It was great
Thank you,
talking to you,
Jane.
and I'll see you again. And
Yeah.
thank you so much again for your valuable tips and great time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Bye.
Bye.